Come on.
This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, Jay.
Hold on. Hey, guys, I'm going to scrub this entrance. No, hold on. I'm going to scrub
Please do.
I screwed that one up. No, hold on. I can cut that on. Cut that on the thing. I hit the wrong button.
Matt's losing confidence in us.
Yeah, my bad.
It's really comforting. We're not the only ones that have issues with this.
Yeah.
It's one of these days. This is going to be great.
Yes.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint's Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. You've heard their point. Now listen to the counterpoint.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. We are coming to you on August 11th, 2021. Today we have a special show for you, but let us introduce our panelists and our guests. In your upper right-hand corner is our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. In our upper left-hand corner is our special guest today, Matt Knoedler of caucusroom.com. Matt, did I get that correct?
Perfect.
Okay. And I am Leon Brathwaite. Normally they call me the last word in liberty. So today we'll be finding out a little bit of the caucus room and a little bit about Matt's background. And he will tell us a little bit about what's going on with his whole activities leading up to his presence here with us. So Matt, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. Yes, actually, and can I say hi to Jason, who just made it in here as well?
Yeah, sorry about that technical difficulties.
No problem.
Nice to meet you all.
Okay. All right. So Matt, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. You bet. Again, my name is Matt Knoedler. I'm the co-founder and CEO of caucusroom.com. Caucus Room is a social network that is geared towards conservatives and freedom lovers, libertarians who want to find a place to caucus online locally. And so think of sort of nextdoor.com, but for conservatives and libertarians to find one another and talk about what they can be doing in their community locally to become, active and make a difference. I think a lot of people feel, particularly in areas like, where you all are from in California, as well as here where I'm from in Colorado, you can feel pretty alone. And you wonder if there's anyone who agrees with you at all on your street and your neighborhood. And we know that there are, even in San Francisco, any city in the country, you will find other people who agree with you or are of like mind on local issues having to do with freedom and the things we want to defend. And we would like to help have those people find one another. And so that's what caucusroom.com is. My background, I'm a former state legislator here in Colorado. I, prior to that, was an advisor to our governor, Colorado's only Republican governor in the last 50 years, Bill Owens, as well as several members of Congress in D.C. And then I spent the next 15 years, I was elected when I was really young to the legislature. And then after I ran for the state Senate and lost that race, I spent the next decade advising companies and philanthropists and political campaigns on political issues here in Colorado. Ultimately, I realized that we were just missing an important tool for the conservative movement, and so that's where the idea for Caucus Room came around, and we've been going for about 2 years now. So I'll talk more about its functions in a minute, but yeah.
Okay, so do you, in terms of your group or in terms of your own background, do you consider yourself a Republican, a Libertarian, or some blend of both?
I would say I am a Republican, but I would say that as a legislator, I was known to vote very libertarian, if that makes sense. So I was opposed to a mandatory seatbelt law. I was opposed to the indoor smoking ban. So I don't know how much more libertarian I can get than opposing the smoking ban.
I have a story about that seatbelt law. Soon after it was implemented, I drove my father-in-law at the time, and who has since been deceased, God rest his soul, and he didn't have his seatbelt on. Now I'd been wearing seatbelts and having the kids put seatbelts on since time immemorial, and but I didn't notice it. And then he goes, "Ooh, whoa! I got to put my seatbelt on. I don't want to get a ticket." And I look over and I go, "You don't mind going through the windshield, but darn for that $200 ticket now, you got to put that seatbelt on."
Well, I tell you what. That is an interesting place, I think, where you find that the political spectrum is not linear. It is, it's round, and it was a place where the left meets right, and there were a group of us, what I would call the libertarian Republicans, who opposed it. But then there was also a group of very progressive Democrats, and mostly, all the members of the Black Caucus, some members who were of Latino background, and they had very serious reasons to oppose the seatbelt law for racial profiling concerns, and some that they had experienced personally. And then then there were those of us who obviously hadn't had that concern, but just did not want government telling us what to do. And so ultimately, we actually defeated the bill by one vote. And in that little coalition, what I would call the Libertarian Progressive Coalition, and it still today is not law in Colorado.
Oh, good.
So,
well, I'll let Jason take the show. I'll let Jason take the show for me. Jason, please go ahead.
Well, you were mentioning too that you have these libertarian leanings. So, what kind of sources did what led you to some of these libertarian sort of leanings, especially being sort of a Republican as well?
Well, I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. I spent my teenage years. Sorry, I heard a noise there.
It's okay.
I grew up
in
left-leaning, very liberal Boulder, Colorado. And my parents were active in the Democratic Party. And I, grew up, obviously, sort of being indoctrinated with their values. And then, ironically, going to the University of Colorado, I had a lot of very libertarian economics professors who were really influential on me. And I also read a lot of books in my political science major, including The Closing of the American Mind by Alan Bloom. And that was a very formative book for me as well. So those were some of the impactful things I came to know just through other circles. I came to know some Republicans, and they weren't what all my liberal friends and parents' friends were telling me they were. I found that they weren't terrible people. They're actually very nice, and it made me kind of second guess a lot of things. But ultimately, by the time I was a legislator, I represented what I would call a pretty working class district, probably middle class to working class district. And, I knew that there were a lot of guys who would get off the shift at the brewery, and they would go down to a restaurant, and, everybody knew that bar was there for, a beer and cigarette. And I didn't feel like it was our role in government to go down there and to tell them we're here to help them. And I don't think I would have gone very well if I did, by the way. So that was, I felt like I was representing my district by being libertarian, but I definitely, understanding all sides of the political spectrum, I've just come to find it's better for us to get out of the way and let people live their lives. So,
and that's always an interesting. Oh, sorry.
I just had just a question about the economics professors you had association with. Did they expose you to Austrian economics? Any of that
to Hayek?
Hayek, Mises, any of them?
I would not say directly. It was more. There was. I did have a Socratic class. I can remember that was just a small, forum in which a professor who was just about to retire, last name was Paulson. He was he said all these things that I thought were just crazy at the time. And this was 20 years ago, but he said, among other things, he said, I predict that all money will be privatized. Like all currency will be private. He pointed out all these government functions today that the private sector would do better. Yes. And it's been extraordinary to me to think of those sessions in which I argued with him passionately. I'm like, oh, that's crazy. Yeah, government, could never do currency better. And he said, really, what's a credit card? And that got me thinking. And then more I, of course, now with cryptocurrency, it's a whole nother level. So
indeed.
Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead, Leon.
But yeah, you just mentioned cryptocurrencies. I think we have a long way to go in terms of cryptocurrency becoming a more consumer friendly and more usable in society. But I think we are heading in that direction. And I mean, this is certainly one of the things that we would like to see, where the privatization of currency becomes a reality, because I think it's going to be a hell of a lot better than the central bank, the Federal Reserve in our case, just printing money or quazoo. Look at inflation right now. And I don't know how long this is going to continue, but this is not good for the country.
Good point. I totally agree. I also, the blockchain technology interests me for a lot of reasons right now. And I love watching, great minds who understand it much better than me explore its possibilities for sort of decentralization of power, because I think that's part of what it offers. So,
well, this decentralization is always a good thing. I mean, the whole purpose, the very foundation of our nation was the decentralization of power, where some things lie with the states and some with the federal government, and nearly all of it with the individual citizens. But now what has happened is that we've seen a reversal of that, where the federal government is trying to take over so many things and trying to mandate things for us. This is a total reversal of our founding. So it's I think cryptocurrency, I hope, will push us back in the right direction.
Well, and you got to realize too that the first currency in the United States, at least that people were using back in those days, sort of market oriented, was gold. I mean, people were literally using coins made of gold, and then of course there was paper money early on. It didn't work out too well, as they just tried to print to fund the revolution and other things.
Yes.
But certainly the market derived currencies. I mean, people demanded gold, and it wasn't until later on. But anyway, this is kind of a digression. But one of the reasons I was asking you that question earlier, Matt, was just because it's interesting to know how people have evolved to get to the place they're at with respect to liberty. Because so many times, I mean, you go to a school that is essentially is dominated by socialist teachings. I mean, a government-run school, and then and so almost all of the solutions are government solutions that are presented to problems. And so it's really interesting to hear how people got to liberty, because it's usually not just a foregone conclusion.
I mean, I definitely am. I've got the passion of a convert for sure, coming from growing up in Boulder, but and maybe people in California will appreciate this, but how do you rebel against your parents if you grow up in liberal Boulder? Well, you probably develop some conservative values, and that's enough to get them pretty riled up. I mean, they're wonderful parents, but I know I drive them nuts with my freedom loving, don't tell me what to do for my own safety kind of approach to things. And I got to say, when I was in the legislatures 15 years ago, I would say the Democratic Party was different back then too. There were a lot more of them who felt that same exact way what I just said. Don't tell me what to do. And I got along with them really, really well. And some are still close friends of mine, but I think it's changed a bit. And now there's kind of a don't tell me what to do side of the aisle. And there's not as many of them on there now. It's my own opinion, but.
I have some, I have some parallel experience with this very same thing within the family. I am one of 9. I am the second to last of nine kids. My parents were not big politically. I mean, they had political views and all that kind of stuff and things like that.
They sound like they didn't have a whole lot of time for politics.
That really, really. But by the time I came to the United States, I probably could call me a socialistic Democrat, I guess, probably. But I gradually I moved away from that thinking, and I ended up where I am today. But this started about, I don't know, maybe 40 years ago. But the thing is that I have well, except for one sister, so I have 7 siblings who are on the left, and some of them on the very far left, quite frankly. And we get into some discussions like you wouldn't believe. I mean, most of them are well, all of them I would say are great people, great guys and gals. But boy, we get into some heated discussions. You wouldn't believe that we're related, quite frankly. That's because they cannot believe that I'm a man of the right. They cannot believe that.
I tell you what, I also, just having worked in government, I mean, I'm fully admit I'm a complete political hack at this point. My entire career is either as an advisor in politics, or I did lobbying, and of course I was in the legislature, and I had been an advisor to governors and congressmen. And one of the things I really found is that government just doesn't solve the problems that it sets out to solve nearly as well as people are led to believe. I mean, the intent is good, but the resolution just isn't as good. But I learned it my own way. If I can tell just a quick story on that. As a legislator, I had an intern who was putting himself through college by running his own limousine business. And the problem was that back at that time in Colorado, there was, I believe it actually is still there, a requirement that every limousine have a television, phone, and beverage service. So now this is in 2005. You're thinking of Michael, what's his name in Wall Street, the movie.
Michael Douglas, yeah.
Michael Douglas, yeah.
Yes.
But of course, taxi cabs put that in there as a barrier of entry into the market, and to keep a separation between the taxi business and the limo business. Well, by 2005, it was a really stupid law. I got a great, profile in the newspaper about what a ridiculous law it was, and how I was trying to repeal it. And I thought it would just slide through, but then the taxi industry killed it when it got to the state Senate. It blew my mind. So I thought this, my intern, who was going to continue his business and still to this day does, he's actually also the mayor of my local town now. But he had this vision, and I wasn't able to accomplish it in government. But here's the crazy thing. 5 or 6 years later, I'm in Washington, D.C., and I meet a friend for lunch, and he comes out of this nice black car. And I said, "Wow, driving a limo around town, are you?" And he said, "Oh, no, I took an Uber." And I, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, it's like a taxi, except it's a scheduled service technically, because the app lets me schedule the service. So it operates as a limousine and gets away from all of the taxi laws." So Uber and technology had circumvented essentially the laws that I wasn't able to change as a legislator. And it was extremely powerful to me as a lesson in the ineffective nature of government relative to the business opportunity that frankly a poorly functioning government has put in place. And so, if only I had thought of Uber instead of that stupid bill, I probably I wouldn't be doing a startup now. But anyway.
Well, it also points out this crony, all of these examples that abound, unfortunately, way too much, of crony capitalists working in cahoots with government. And so you end up with taxi cab companies that stayed the same way for decades, not as cell phone technology and smartphone technology evolved, did they jump right on that bandwagon of developing some app to make it easier for their customers to take a cab ride. No, and they don't want you to pay with a credit card or, heaven forbid, on an app. They want you to, if you're gonna be so obstinate as to give them a credit card, they're gonna put it in one of those metal things that go chunk, and they're gonna give you a written copy in triplicate, and they're going to resist any kind of development to make life easier for their customers. And so they're just as guilty as anybody else. The government actually impedes their development. They just go, we're fat, dumb, and happy. We've got protection from the almighty great God government. So we're just going to sit here on our haunches and do absolutely nothing until an Uber and a Lyft come along and put a monkey in the wrench. But anyway, there you have it.
Yeah.
Matt, you just said something that kind of make me wonder. I mean, you of course being a former legislator.
Mm-hmm.
You said that about most of the times the intent is good. But I truly wonder about that. Okay, sure, government wants to try something, whatever. They want to help somebody here. They want to do this here, or do that there. I wish they would stay within their constitutional mandate, but that is a little slightly different discussion. But the point is, though, at what point do we stop using those words that the intent is good? Because we are seeing things that are failing in society that clearly our legislators can change, but they don't. They don't, because of their special interest connections, because of whatever. So at what point do we stop saying that the intent is good? So as a former legislator, maybe you could try to answer that for me, maybe?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you're in the legislature, when I was a congressional aide, you actually interact with the other side more often, right, than you would in your own circle of friends or enclave. I mean, granted, I know you all are in California. I'm here in increasingly blue Colorado.
Sorry about that.
And that's all right. And so, but still, it's easy for us to kind of get around people we agree with, and we don't get to know people on the other side. I still obviously have a lot of family members and loved ones on the left. I'm sure you all do too. Yes. But I found I meant it when I said that I had real friends on the left. I did not assume ill intentions on them. And later on, for a number of years, as I was a lobbyist, it was as a well-known former Republican legislator, you would think I have a hard time talking with the left, but I at least found that if I made the assumption that they were meaning well with what they were doing, I could begin a conversation to change their mind about what they were doing. If I make the assumption that what they're doing is evil or ill-intended, and I'm not saying you don't have a point there, because sometimes I have to wonder with the mean-spirited nature of some of these things we see, but I do find when I meet them face to face, particularly if I've known them for a time, that I do make that assumption they meant well, and I can usually unwind a little bit of the mistake that's about to be made. It's the what was the something about it's a bad idea. I've always felt that they're a party of good intentions but bad ideas, that's my general approach, and I don't think I couldn't have Thanksgiving dinner if I didn't feel that way with my family, if I didn't feel that way about them. So,
well, one of the one of the sayings we've been kicking around on our show recently is the idea that feelings don't care about your facts from the left.
I do think so. If I'll just plug Caucus Room one more time to say, I do think that it's really easy to those times to just feel like you're alone, like that, because the left they think that any of us who don't buy their line, hook, line, and sinker are actually we have terrible intent. And so it's very difficult to be in your neighborhood and maybe someone kind of offhanded says something about like that about a libertarian conservative value, and well, they must hate people, or they don't care about this because they don't want government to try to fix it. And it's very difficult to figure out how to break through that. And I do think by finding some more people in your own neighborhood that agree with you, you'll at least have more confidence to speak up and say, actually, I don't know if you know this, but I feel that way. I don't feel like government's going to solve this particular problem. It's not that I don't care about people. It's that, I've found that the best way to solve this problem is not with a government solution. And so it's, we sort of shrink and we cower because we feel like we're alone and we'll lose our relationship with our neighbor, our friend. And sometimes it's just having confidence to know that the things we believe in are very logical, things that more people believe in than we think than we realize, but we have to find one another. So
the thing that really gets to me at times, maybe we probably get into knuckleheads, Jason, I don't know, but the thing that really gets to me at times is that people will look at me and make presumptions of what I should or should not believe, and they feel free to speak to me until they realize, well, no, I am somebody of the right, or I'm a libertarian, and all of a sudden I am this mean spirit who don't care about this, who don't care about that, or whatever racial things you can say about me because I happen to be black and all these other things. That is where it gets problematic for me personally, is that people make presumptions about me before they know anything about me, just because I'm black, just because I'm foreign, and I speak with an accent that clearly says that I'm an immigrant. So those sort of things really get to me at times in my interaction. But I think we are knuckleheads, Jason. I don't know.
Actually, let's bypass knuckleheads because there was a few more things I wanted to talk with Matt about real quick about his legislative past. And one of the things on this show, a lot of times for libertarians, it's a very grassroots effort to try and get into politics. If you're going to try and run for office. And so I was just curious what your experience was like trying to run for office. Was there a big structure behind you, or were you able to, did you really have to go knocking on doors and really, press hands? Or I was just curious what kind of resources and how you got involved.
I am so glad you asked that, because that's literally the basis of the name of the company I founded here. It was the Caucus system here in Colorado that helped us through it. But before I say forward there, and to kind of come full circle to my discussion about my own libertarian sort of values while I was in the legislature, one of the only elected libertarians I believe in the country at that time was my city councilman, Doug, I forget his last name, here in Lakewood, Colorado. So they libertarians can carry a pretty large percentage on a lot of Colorado ballots, for what it's worth. And particularly as I think you and I have discussed in the past, that if the party ID is not on there, then they can do particularly well. I was 28 years old when I announced for the state senate. All my family members were on the other side of the political aisle, so some of them still wrote me because they love me as family. But other than that, I didn't have a large Christmas card list. I had nothing to start from. And as much as the caucus systems that are particularly, for a lot of states west of the Mississippi, the caucus system is a legacy of the parties that is dying sort of quickly. It does one thing very well, and that is to get all the neighbors in a room talking about the candidates they're going to support. And I went through the caucus system to get my nomination as the Republican candidate for the state legislature. I took there was about 140 delegates. I tried to meet personally with all of them in about the 3 weeks between the caucuses and the assembly. And I was able to get, I had two opponents, and I got about 100 votes. The other two split 20 each. It helped that the congressman in the area, the last two congressmen in the area, had endorsed me, as well as the incumbent. But honestly, those are still lifelong friends of mine, those delegates to that assembly through the caucus system. But operationally, and this was what came to me when I was doing Caucus Room, it was exactly that question. How do you find that local support network without spending years building it? And the caucus system provides that, because those people, it is essentially, for all the people in the software business, it's basically code, right? Like you meet a bunch of functions. You meet on this certain time, you perform some certain functions, you're organized locally, And at the end of the day, the output is you nominate a candidate. And I realized that while we may be struggling to keep the caucus system alive in analog form, that there could be a future in it in digital form. In other words, to help people perform those same functions of finding people locally to support through a locally oriented social network that's digital instead of analog.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we've just about reached the end of our time, but I really liked hearing about that. And we'll have you on for the next show, too, which we're going to do just after this. And we'll kick over some other topics. But thanks so much for joining us, Matt. And and I got to tell you, visitors or our viewers, go check out caucusroom.com. It's a great place for you to try and get involved and find out more about people, like-minded people in your community. So,
thanks for having me.